You remember that story from a few weeks ago where a Vatican Roman Curia archbishop who runs the old Pontifical Academy established by Pope John Paul II to combat the rising inhuman culture in the West recently published what looked like guidelines for embracing the very evil that Pontifical Academy was meant to fight against? The controversy stirred up by that move and the reporting on it has caused the archbishop in question, Vincenzo Paglia, to publicly declare that Pope Francis's changes to the practice of Catholic morality are permanent and cannot be reversed in the future. Now, he's obviously speaking in the context of his own work, as well as obviously tipping his hat to Amoris Laetitia and Fiducia Supplicans and a few other things, since he is himself pushing the church to passively embrace the dark turn the secular world is taking in relation to questions about human dignity and the value of human life. He is himself a revolutionary's revolutionary. He is one of the main agents for change. And as we go along with the story today, you will see that there are rumors that he and some others are about to get rewarded for the very good work they've done. And we'll put good in, of course, quotes there. But our story comes to us from katholisch.de, which is the official news website of the German Bishops' Conference, and they give us this encouraging headline: Curia Archbishop Paglia, Pope Francis's course is irreversible. In the Vatican, Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia is considered to be someone who advocates for openness in bioethical issues. This also applies to the issue of mercy ending people who are suffering. He defends Pope Francis's course against conservative critics. This article should be considered an endorsement of Archbishop Paglia's position on this, given that the German bishops are publishing this article in an uncritical manner. And how do you know they're doing this in an uncritical manner just from the headline? Because I'd use the word openness when talking about bioethical issues. Openness there means having an open mind and being open to the world's offer for changing things and how the world is changing morality right in front of our eyes. Traditionalist Catholic asks a pertinent question: is Paglia the bishop has a James Martin mural painted on the wall? I believe that is him. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments if you know for sure if that's him, but I do believe that is him. So let's take a look at this uncritical manner in which katholisch.de, the German bishops, the German synodal way bishops, are talking about this. So you can really get to what they're talking about here. Quote: Curia Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia has emphasized his biographical and thematic closeness to Pope Francis. He had met him long before the papal selection in 2013 at a meeting in Spain, said the head of the Pontifical Academy for Life in an interview published on Tuesday in the daily newspaper Corriere del Sera. At that time, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was still Archbishop of Buenos Aires. Years before him, the then Sant'Egidio parish priest Matteo Zuppi, now cardinal in Bologna, and possible Pope Francis II, had already met the future Pope in Argentina. Even then, we saw him as the expression of a new vision of the church, a poor church on the side of the poor, explained Paglia. This vision will endure despite all resistance and opponents. There may be resistance and attempts to reverse course, but I do not believe that will be possible, said the Archbishop, who is part of the Sant'Egidio community. End quote. Sant'Egidio, by the way, in South America is being talked about in ways that makes it sound like a South American version of St. Gallen. Okay. And here he talks about how there will be no reversal for this. I'm going to show you in the second half of this live stream an attempt by them to guarantee that won't happen. So stay with us on this. But you notice how they're framing this. A church for the poor is a great framing. After all, Jesus loved the poor and told us we'll always have the poor with us, and how we treat the poor will reflect on us in our judgment. It's great framing. It's also dishonest framing, given Francis's alliance with secular authorities and the obsession with money this Vatican has had, including how much money has been hidden in various off-the-record accounts that Archbishop Vigano found, as well as Cardinal Pell before his mysterious passing. But to the casual observer, the framing of the Church of the Poor is good for political messaging. But the changes to the faith can't be changed back, is what the Cardinal wants to drive home to us, because that's what Francis has been doing, changing how the faith is practiced, even when that practice violates the constant teaching of the Church. Just look at the issue of communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. Catholic morality is being reduced to a mere ideal that can't be lived up to, with the real consequences of not living up to that ideal being eliminated, because apparently God is a God of surprises and constant mercy. But how far will this go? Further than you might want to think about. This archbishop will probably soon be given a cardinal's hat, as he has been behind the Pontifical Academy for Life's changes to Catholic morality on the issue of people receiving medical assistance to removing themselves from this mortal coil, and for mercy endings performed by doctors on those who are suffering. Both are gross violations of Catholic morality, for which should be obvious reasons, but clearly aren't given the number of Catholics who support and defend this move. Now, back to the article, as they will give you more details here. Quote, the Vatican's leading thinker on bioethical issues also spoke out in favor of a return to more humanity and end of the life. We think far too little about how the extension of life and the latest technologies contribute to the prolongation of illness and suffering, said Paglia. When asked whether active mercy endings would remain taboo for the Catholic Church, the Archbishop said, I think people's suffering should be removed from the cold mechanism of the law. Death does dirty work that people should not take on, but death must become more human, or more precisely, it must become more human again. Paglia recently published a book entitled A Small Dictionary of the End of Life, in which he it's a small lexicon for the end of life. This is a translation issue, in which he addresses issues such as uh, mercy endings and life extension. The Vatican's Life Academy, which he leads, used to be a conservative think tank for church statements about the Moloch ritual and artificial ways of creating life, and then, of course, mercy endings. Under Paglia's leadership, it has expanded its range of topics and also accepted supporters of legal liberalization and bioethical issues as members. End quote. That last sentence, there's a nice way of saying it's that Pontifical Academy now infamously allows people who are declared enemies of the church's teachings on morality into its ranks to corrupt the institution. But one way he's not wrong, and that's how you sell a lie, is to wrap it up in truth. The end of life should become human again. Western culture has, since the elimination of religion from the public square, sanitized the whole process, pushing it out of sight to give everyone a false view of living basically forever, while we all know that's not true. But previously, Paglia had been an advocate for watering down or even changing the practice of the faith on these issues. He verbally reiterates the teaching, like Francis does in Fiducia Supplicans on the James Martin sin, but advocated changing the practice, also like Fiducia Supplicans on the James Martin sin. That caused a firestorm of controversy in the public square, as you might expect. Earlier in this summer, the Pontifical Academy for Life issued a little lexicon for the end of life, by which all appearances played fast and loose with Catholic morality, and opened the door for the mirage of a Catholic approach to implementing various forms of mercy endings and doctors helping people remove themselves from this mortal coil. Those procedures are being made legal in the secular world. And as in other issues, the Vatican under Francis has been seeking to have the church embrace the secular morality in an effort to make the church more popular in the eyes of the world. One of the things Paglia is seeking to make permanent is his teaching in the little lexicon for end of life, which by any sane reading allows for those secular practices to be embraced in some manner or another. So I'm going to show you here a brief synopsis the uh, from the Pillar to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. The Pillar reported on this earlier in the summer. Here's from their article on this. Quote, according to the Academy's president, Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, the text is not meant to offer new teaching, but instead aims to cut through confusion over key terms and offer clarity for those navigating the most complicated and sensitive situations. Yet on the issue of basic care for unresponsive patients, the 88-page booklet seems instead to raise real questions about its understanding of and alignment with previous church teaching documents, and the mandate of the church, as articulated by Vatican II, to read and respond to the signs of the times. In some cases, it appears to fall short of even secular thinkers' appreciation for the need to protect vulnerable human life. Practices like physicians helping people remove themselves from this mortal coil and mercy endings are now well advanced in countries like Canada, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, with Spain and Italy well on their way to joining them. Ethical, legal, and political debates over the very nature of human life and dignity have been underway for some time in France, the UK, and the United States, where doctors helping people remove themselves is legal in 9 states. Seen through the lens of what Pope Francis calls a throwaway culture, there are also clear social and structural factors which push Western cultures towards a devaluing of human life as it reaches its end. End quote. Note that the article points out that Paglia's approach goes beyond what some countries allow for and what secular ethicists argue for, and embraces the advancing progressive side of the secular debate. That's not just aligning the church with a secular view, since there isn't a secular view that is consistently held in the Western world. It's aligning the church with an advancing revolutionary view on these issues. That's why I expect him to be rewarded with a red hat in the coming consistory. Though he is 79 years old, which means he's about to hit the can't participate in a conclave age of 80. But that won't stop them from giving him an honorary cardinal, making him an honorary cardinal, which happens all the time. So I'm going to actually pivot here to what I would call the reward phase of this. So let's go to Gloria TV with this, I think, this good report here. Their headline is Next Consistory, 7th of December. Well, Pope Francis has held more consistories than anybody, it seems like, since Vatican II. Consistory is where a archbishop typically is made a cardinal. They're summoned to Rome. There's a big ceremony. They are elevated to the office of cardinal. Right now, there are more cardinals than canon law allows for. The canon law allows for 120 cardinals, but the practice has been to have more than 120 as retirements happen. And if there is not a consistory this year, then next year there's going to be fewer than 120 cardinals pretty early in the year. So it's likely you're going to have several new cardinals made late this year, and December 7th seems like a great time for that. It's been expected. He's done these almost every year of his pontificate. And Paglia would be great to be given that honorary, being made a cardinal, but too old to do anything with the office, as a reward, because being made cardinal is a reward. It's a sign of faith being placed in the new cardinal, or the new that they are basically on board with the reigning pope, but also as a job well done for those older men who are named cardinals. But let's go over this so you can get the details. Francis has held a consistory to create new cardinals every year of his papacy, with the exception of his first in 2021, writes David's Ruminations.blogspot. This year's already half over, and a number of major events are already planned. In particular, a papal trip to Asia and Oceania, a papal trip to Luxembourg and Belgium, the Synod, and the start of the Holy Year on 24th of December. That leaves November and most of December. The writer believes that most likely date is Saturday, 7th of December, just before the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. The consistory is usually announced 1 to 2 months in advance. Since I suspect that some of the participants of the Synod will be on the list, I don't expect it before the Synod ends on Sunday, October 27th. There will be several opportunities during the following week. The Angelus on Sunday, 27th of October, the general audience on Wednesday, the 30th of October, and the events around All Saints and All Souls. Note that on 7th of December, there will be 121 cardinal electors out of a total of 236, assuming there are no deaths among the cardinals. End quote. So this is, of course, not concrete, but it's reasonable to believe that there's that will happen this year, because 121. Remember, the limit is 120, and there are going to be people retiring in December and January. They retire from being able to participate in a conclave as soon as they hit the age of 80, and there will be vacancies coming, and as next year progresses. And I might be wrong, but I believe Cardinal Sarah hits 80 next year. Although I think I might be wrong about that. But there are cardinals in large numbers retiring, which means the number of cardinal electors that Pope Francis has chosen himself will go up dramatically. The proportion of the cardinals that he has chosen goes up. He's already chosen something like 66% of them, and that's going to just go up and increase every year that he remains on the throne of Peter. And I expect Paglia to be given the red hat at this consistory for a job well done, even though he won't be able to, starting next year, won't be able to participate. But a little closer to home, the media has been signaling a different concern for Pope Francis that I expect he'll address. The Church in America, which is too conservative, with seminarians being too conservative and too rigid. Keep in mind that a cardinal appointed to the Roman Curia leaves a diocese open. Cardinal Supich hit retirement age this year, but is still running Chicago. It's entirely feasible that he will be moved to the Roman Curia. Someone like Cardinal McElroy will be promoted to Chicago, leaving San Diego open for a new bishop. There are other potential vacancies coming in the US, and consistories give the Vatican ample opportunities to address those concerns, since there are numerous vacant sees in the US. But the Vatican is very concerned about this, judging from some American magazine stories published this year. So we go here, starting with this one. Why Pope Francis is worried about seminaries and young priests with authoritarian attitudes. Ugh. Look, you will see what they mean by authoritarian attitudes is a Catholic attitude about things, a Catholic attitude about who participates at the altar, who can actually assist at the altar, who does the readings, who the decorum at Mass, how the Mass is offered, what is taught from the ambo in a homily every Sunday. These are your authoritarian attitudes. From the article, quote, Catholics from the pews to the Pope are worried about young priests. At the October meeting of the Synod on Synodality, Pope Francis gave an unexpected intervention, denouncing clericalism and lamenting the scandal of young priests and seminarians trying on fancy vestments in Roman shops. The Synod's final document echoed some of these concerns, pointing to the formalism and ideology that leads to authoritarian attitudes in some priests, and calling for a consultation of seminary formators on how to teach priests to lead in a synodal style. End quote. Authoritarianism in this case means not being sufficiently synodal or being too traditionally minded. If a priest dares to think that he should preach Catholicism and warn people once in a while of the four last things and to take sin seriously, he's apparently authoritarian. If he has preconciliar attitudes about who serves at the altar and having due reverence during the celebration of the Mass, that's authoritarian. We know from the data that seminarians and priests ordained in the last few years are much, much more conservative than their forebears, with even secular media lamenting that progressive priests are going to be a thing from the past. And now, while this was not a secular source on this, I will show you, and I'll show you what I mean by this. I'll bring this back to the consistory question here, so you can see how this all fits together. But the Pillar reported on this themselves too, with this headline: Study: Liberal U.S. priests facing progressive extinction. Yeah, for some good news on the subject, here's a quote from that article because I know you want some good news. Quote, the share of new U.S. Catholic priests identifying as theologically progressive has fallen so low that the phenomenon has all but vanished, according to a report published Tuesday. The 18-page report, issued November 7th by the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., said that when priests were asked to describe their theological outlook on a spectrum from very conservative or orthodox to very progressive, none of those ordained after 2020 described themselves as very progressive. The report included a graph showing that the proportion of priests who identified as somewhat progressive or very progressive fell from almost 70% among those ordained in 1965 to 1969 to less than 5% among those ordained in 2020 or later. Researchers said there was a similar drift away from political liberalism and toward moderate and conservative positions. Simply put, the portion of new priests who see themselves as politically liberal or theologically progressive has been steadily declining since the Second Vatican Council and has now all but vanished, the report said. End quote. And that, I believe, is good news in general, and it's upset all the right people. And I suspect this is good news for people outside of the United States as well, but it is a warning about the coming consistory. Cardinals get moved around, leaving vacancies in major dioceses, which causes a downstream effect of new bishops being made. Any new bishop made by Francis is absolutely going to be on board with his desire to remake the church and squash this problem. We've already seen this take effect in some dioceses already. If you remember the story I reported on a month or two ago, the Vatican is being proactive by implementing bans on podcasts in Jesuit seminaries. And if it's in Jesuit seminaries, then it's in other seminaries as well. Remember, the one of the things that previous American Magazine article I told you about said was that they need to actually talk to seminary formators, meaning these are the priests in charge of formation of future priests, that they need to talk to them. And so here is a reminder of how seriously they're taking this. This is from June. Headline: The Changing Face of Seminary Formation, Group Therapy, Digital Detoxing, and More Listening. That digital cleansing is banning shows like this one. Taylor Marshall, who is explicitly named in that article, as you'll recall, as well as others. The article explicitly declares that to be the case. They believe that the internet is the reason young seminarians and young priests are more conservative than their forebears. It's not because they've seen the decline in the church in real time and they have read old books and can see that new things in the church don't exactly line up with what the church has always taught. No, 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 no. They believe it's because of Taylor Marshall, which is so incredible that it's just funny. The Vatican is well aware of the changing face of the American priesthood and wants to do something to stop this problem from continuing. And a consistory is a good place to start by placing Bergoglians into positions of authority in the hierarchy and in the local places in the church. Again, Cardinal Supich hit 75 this year, which as a local ordinary means he hit retirement age. But Pope Francis chose to keep him in place, which is his prerogative. But there's a cardinal who is not an archbishop of the United States who may very well get moved to that position, and that is Cardinal McElroy. So don't be surprised if you see Cardinal McElroy get moved to Chicago, and maybe even Supich get moved out of Chicago into the Roman Curia. One of the rumors has been this year that he's going to get moved to um, to dicastery for the liturgy to work with uh, Cardinal Roach, because Supich has been a good loyal warrior on the issues of the traditional mass, and he doesn't speak Italian, but Archbishop Roach is an Englishman, so they could work well together. The effect this has is the you start seeing somebody made a cardinal move to a better diocese that fits them better, and then there's a domino effect of bishops getting moved around and new bishops being made. And there are plenty of openings already in the United States, so there is an impetus to create these bishops. And anytime you see a new bishop, I get emails sometimes from people asking what I think of this. I have no idea most of the time about new bishops because they're usually just auxiliary bishops that no one's ever heard of. But all you have to do is go look to see where they worked, who they worked under, or read a few of their homilies or public writings, and you could see usually where they line up. Oh, Dale Jackson is. There's a person who is repeating some of the silliest Protestant stuff, and I'm having a hard time because the live chat is very, 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 very full. Dale, you're gone. Bye now. Oh man, it's a good time. It's a good time. All right, folks, let me know what you think about this in the comments. I am curious what people think, because do you believe that Paglia will be promoted for, a job well done? That he has, even because again, you can give a cardinal, you can make someone an honorary essentially an honorary cardinal in their retirement years. That actually does happen quite frequently. It's definitely a job well done kind of statement. Do you think that's going to happen with him? Let me know in the comments, please. Do you do you believe that there will be a consistory this year? New cardinals made. On paper, it looks like there's necessity for one. Do you believe it'll just happen early next year before Lent? Let me know what you think about this in the comments, please. And yes, hit the like button if you haven't. It does help. As the sharing this on social media, that helps a lot too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.